I got a pretty good list of questions from someone a few days ago. I was going to actually add these to the Q and A episode, but there's quite a few and they're all centered around digestion. So I figured I would just make a separate video that just touched on these digestion questions. I think they're questions that several of you probably benefit from, definitely things that I've heard before from other people. So I wanted to just go ahead and answer these in a video. I went ahead and cleared it with this person, so no big deal. We'll get these out and hopefully some of you will benefit from them. So first one, as I've transitioned into lower fat, roughly 20% of caloric intake, I've noticed that times when I have a lot at one time, my digestion seems horrible. This may be confounded by many things, but I was wondering if there can be a downregulation of bile production with chronic low fat intake. Have you noticed any of your athletes struggling with this? So yes, it's just like any enzyme, any kind of digestive process. You can expect some kind of downregulation if you're, not feeding it a certain macronutrient. So that's likely what's happening here. And then you're having a bolus dose of fats and you're running into issues with digestion. So a couple ways you can get around this without actually increasing fat intake, because it sounds like that's part of your nutritional protocol. If you're not planning on increasing fat intake gradually, then you can supplement with something like D-limonene that will help with bioproduction. You can spread your fats out a little bit more. Those would probably be the two main things that I would look at doing. And outside of that, you're not really going to probably be able to trick your body into producing more bile. You could look into easier to digest fat sources, possibly less complex. A grass-fed meat versus a coconut oil going to be a little less complex to digest. But outside of that, those other two things that I mentioned would probably be your best bet. I don't remember what podcast it was mentioned, but I heard eating vegetables with fat can increase absorption of the micronutrients. Do you have any idea why this would be? And is there any reason that we should emphasize it? So yeah, I would assume that we were probably talking about fat soluble micronutrients. I'm not exactly sure which podcast that was on, but there's actual literature on this, studies showing that it really doesn't take that much fat for these fat soluble nutrients to absorb. So I think people have this idea in their head that they take something like vitamin D, for example, and they have to take it with a 20 gram per fat meal. That's not the case, at least from all the literature that I've seen. And we also have to remember that we store these fat soluble nutrients in our body. So if it absorbs a little better one time versus another, it's not like we're going to excrete excess. I mean, it stores, it's a little bit different. It's quite a bit different than a water soluble micronutrient. So I would say as long as you're not fasted and there's, a few grams of fat in the meal, maybe 5 or so, I don't see that being an issue. I'm not sure which episode that was, like I said, but I would assume that's what we were talking about. Next one, with athletes on a low carb diet, do you have them supplement with anything like Metamucil for digestion? It saved me the first time I tried carb cycling, but I've heard mixed things about long-term health effects. I will have people use fiber supplements. The biggest issue I see with fiber supplements is using a single source fiber supplement, and the issue is that it's usually totally soluble fiber or totally insoluble fiber. I prefer a blend supplement for most people, unless I know there's a specific issue, like they have really hard stool, and I might need more soluble fiber. They have really having a hard time going at all, so they might need more insoluble fiber. But in general, I like a blended supplement. Their Jarrow Formulas has a product called Gentle Fiber, and I suggest that to a lot of people. It's a really good multi-source. That's a pretty clean supplement. There's not a bunch of extra filler crap in there that you have to, worry about messing up your macros or whatever. So that's a really good product, and there are several others out there. But yes, that is something good to use. I know that the typical bro diet doesn't exactly have a ton of variety, but as I learn more, I feel like mixing sources of proteins and vegetables may be beneficial for our digestive health. Or is it the opposite? Do you want to mix it up, or is it better to be consistent? Yes, I like mixing sources. I think for different rates of digestion, different nutrients, just different flavors. I mean, that's always nice too. But the biggest thing is you need to, know how each source digests individually. I wouldn't just start mixing stuff together, having 8 food sources in a meal and not know what's going on. You have digestive issues, you can't figure it out. It's a big pain in the butt to do an elimination type diet if you have so much going on. You can start very basic, start mixing up sources. I think that mixing sources also is good just from a sensitivity standpoint, that you're not developing any kind of food sensitivity, allergy, things like that. And some foods are more prone to that than others. But in general, yes, I like that idea. As a woman, I know that my digestion, or at least bowel movements, tend to get messed up prior to my period. Also, I lost my period when I got down to 9% body fat for my first show. Ever since it's gotten back, it seems like bloating and typical PMS symptoms are much worse than before my prep. I'm not sure if this is a coincidence or not. Do you have any athletes who have experienced this? Definitely. Not just my athletes, lots of athletes. Without blood work, it would be really hard to tell you what exactly is going on, but chances are in these situations that your hormones didn't bounce back like they should have. It sounds like you're still having a cycle, so that's good. That doesn't necessarily mean that the cycle itself is proper as far as the peaks and valleys in hormone levels, and could be part of the reason that you're having, severe bloating and exaggerated PMS symptoms. Chances are that's probably what's going on. You would need to get a hormone panel done and check that out. I wouldn't you really be shooting in the dark without at least knowing what's going on in that regard. So, all right, just a couple more. On that note, I know there's a little bit of research on periodizing female nutrition based on menstrual cycle. Do you have any experience with this in your athletes? And if so, were results good? I've wondered for a long time whether women would naturally be more likely to put on body fat or unable to lose it around ovulation, since this would be the most conducive to support a child. Just some thoughts. I think Lyle McDonald knows more about my body than I do. I'm pretty sure I heard that concept from him. Yeah, he was on, I think it was the Ice Cream for PR's podcast, Jeff Nippert. He has pretty good podcasts. I do like his stuff. He talked about that a lot, and also talked about periodizing training. This is tricky because, and he mentions this in there, it is so individual. I have people that literally nothing happens during their period. They don't gain weight, they don't bloat, they don't, training performance stays the same, or maybe they go up a couple pounds in water weight, but it doesn't affect them, nothing that they can notice other than the scale goes up and then it goes back down. So the issue here is that you really need to be in tune with biofeedback to be able to periodize things, and the same goes for training. If for people that it does affect, typically they're going to get weaker around that time. I know a few people specifically that it really hits them hard, and I might periodize some stuff according to that, might do some different things. And normally, if you look at it from an RPE standpoint, what feels like, a weight that felt like an 8 1 week is going to feel like a 10 when you're, around period time. So yeah, definitely from a training standpoint, from a nutritional standpoint, you're looking at a peak in your, female hormones. So it's not necessarily going to be the most conducive time to body composition changes. It's metabolically, you will have a little bit of change. I don't think that you are necessarily, it's not like you're going to, your metabolism is going to half itself and you're going to pile on a bunch of fat, because the hormones directly aren't going to necessarily add fat to you, because you could still be in a caloric deficit. Though I think that you're compounding issues of some slight metabolic changes, hormone changes, and less productive training, and then body comp's affected. So, you might want to plan, if you get really in touch with this cycle, you could plan, a down period there that maybe it's 3 days, maybe it's a week, where you could just do a maintenance phase and try to maintain that week and downregulate nutrition as well. I think there's definitely some merit in that. And I have some gals, like I said, that really get hit hard with this, that we will mess with those variables, and others, it's just not noticeable enough to need to make it that complicated. So last question, and this is more of an opinion than anything else. I've toyed with the idea of a 24-hour fast followed by a carb refeed and a metabolic stress focused trigger session as a way to bring up lagging body parts. As a natural athlete, it sounds logical, a way to increase insulin sensitivity and then shuttle as much nutrition into the muscle as possible. But I was wondering if there's anything you've done with your athletes and had success with it. Okay, I'm not totally 100% sure what you're referring to with metabolic stress focused trigger session. I have a kind of an idea. Maybe I call it something different, but as far as a 24-hour fast goes, I actually have a few people that do it, and I've messed with it with very select people. It's interesting. It kind of freaks some people out, and it's not something I would do with everyone, but I've seen it work in some people. One person, and probably doesn't care if I use her example, I actually do this with my wife, and she does a fast once a week. It's normally about 24 hours. And then on the day that she's fasting, we'll base the night off of hunger. There's a couple protein-based snacks that she'll have that night if she gets really hungry. If not, it'll end up being more like a 20, 30-hour fast or whatever, because she'll sleep through the night and go the next morning. So yeah, you could look at it two ways. You could refeed prior, fast after, or vice versa. I do think there's some merit in it. It's obviously going to increase insulin sensitivity. I don't feel that one day, assuming they're spaced out from each other, is going to do anything to harm metabolic function, especially when you're focusing it around a refeed. So taking those two things into consideration, it's a useful tool with people that have really stubborn insulin sensitivity, maybe girls with PCOS that might have some insulin resistance from that. It's something that they can do. There's a few other instances I could think that you could probably use it, but I like your idea here. I think it's definitely worth trying. Give it a shot, see how you feel. I would monitor biofeedback in the training session the next day. Look at how do you look? Are you filling out? Are you glycogen super compensating? You're getting a bigger pump than you're used to. I would just give it a shot. You're not going to lose muscle in one day. I don't really see any issues with your approach here, so I would give it a go. And that is all the questions. I hope this was useful to you guys. I will post this up, and I appreciate the questions from the gal that sent these to me. So thank you, and enjoy the video, guys.